Imagine stepping into what seems like an ordinary apartment, only to be hit with a chilling sight. Life-size dolls scattered across the floor, their blank eyes staring into nothingness. At first, they appear harmless, like homemade toys. But a closer look reveals something far more sinister. These aren't dolls at all. Beneath the fabric and carefully painted faces lie the mummified remains of young girls, exhumed from their graves and eerily preserved.
Who was arrested in 2011 after the mummified bodies of 26 girls and women between the ages of 3 and 29 were discovered in his apartment in Nizhny Novgorod. Anatoly Moskvin loved history. He spoke 13 languages, traveled extensively.
This is the twisted world of Anatoly Moskvin, a Russian historian whose obsession with death led him down a horrifying path of grave desecration, occult rituals, and a disturbing attachment to the deceased. His crimes sent shockwaves across the nation, leaving behind disturbing questions. How did he go unnoticed for so long? Watch the video to uncover the full extent of this chilling case.
Moskvin is a 52-year-old that, back in the mid to late 2000s, was regarded a genius by many. He was a historian who authored various scientific papers and acquired the knowledge of upwards of 13 different languages. Many of his peers and family saw him as a quiet, ordinary person with no real cause for concern regarding his behavior.
Born on September 1st, 1966 in Nizhny Novgorod, Russia, Anatoly Moskvin was an exceptionally intelligent child. His parents, Yuri and Elvira Moskvin, encouraged his academic pursuits. By adulthood, he had mastered 13 languages and become an expert in history and folklore. But despite his brilliance, he was socially withdrawn, struggling to form connections with others. His isolation deepened after a traumatic incident in childhood that left a permanent scar on his mind. One afternoon, young Anatoly returned home from school with his clothes torn and his body covered in bruises. He had been attacked and raped by a stranger. His parents failed to address the situation, leaving him to suffer in silence. With no support, he retreated into books, particularly those about death, burial rituals, and the supernatural. At 13, he had another chilling experience that shaped his obsession with the dead. While collecting papers for a school recycling project, he wandered into an unfamiliar neighborhood and found himself in the middle of a funeral. A group of mourners, dressed in black cloaks, stood around the open coffin of an 11-year-old girl named Natasha Petrova. As he turned to leave, they grabbed him, pulling him toward the coffin. The girl's grieving mother begged him to kiss her daughter's cold forehead, offering sweets and money in return. He refused, crying and pleading to be let go, but they ignored him. Overwhelmed, he finally relented. Then, in a disturbing ritual, the mourners placed a ring on his finger and another on Natasha's, declaring them bound in a spiritual marriage. That night, Natasha began appearing in Anatoly's dreams. She spoke to him, urging him to embrace the world of necromancy. At first, he was terrified and tried to resist, but the visions didn't stop. Night after night, she returned, whispering that he needed to learn the ways of black magic, insisting that he could bring the dead back to life. His parents, concerned about his strange behavior, took him to a doctor. He was given sedatives to help him sleep, but Natasha's presence in his dreams never faded. One night, she told him that if he wanted her to leave him alone, he needed to perform a ritual. The ritual required a human tooth, and Natasha insisted that it had to come from one of his classmates. Though he was hesitant, the fear of her relentless visits pushed him to follow through. Somehow, he managed to steal a classmate's tooth and carried out the ritual as she instructed. The night he completed it, she disappeared. Moskvin pursued higher education at Moscow University, specializing in Celtic studies. He immersed himself in ancient burial rituals and folklore, trying to understand the connection between life and death. During this time, he joined an occult group known as the Luciferians, who reinforced his belief in magic and resurrection. In the early 2000s, his obsession turned into action. He traveled across Russia, visiting over 750 cemeteries, meticulously documenting gravestones and sleeping on graves, believing it would help him communicate with spirits. The young girls buried there became more than just names on tombstones. He saw them as lost souls in need of rescue. He believed he could give them another chance at life. setting him on a path toward an unthinkable crime. In 2011, Russian authorities launched an investigation into a series of grave desecrations after numerous reports of vandalized cemeteries surfaced. Initially, the police suspected extremist activities, particularly linked to anti-Muslim sentiment. Moskvin had been seen defacing Muslim graves, painting over portraits of the deceased, and even removing bodies. His actions raised concerns that he might be involved in far-right extremism or a potential terrorist plot. As part of the investigation, police raided his apartment on November 2, 2011, expecting to find evidence of extremist literature or plans for attacks. What they discovered instead left even the most hardened officers horrified. Inside his home, they found 29 life-size dolls, but these were no ordinary dolls. Each one was made from the preserved remains of young girls he had exhumed from their graves. Moskvin had meticulously mummified the bodies using a mixture of salt and baking soda to dry them out. He wrapped their limbs in cloth, dressed them in clothing taken from their graves or discarded items, and applied makeup to their faces. Some had buttons sewn in place of eyes, while others had fabric masks.
Да. Вон, видишь?
Ты мне что тут сверху показываешь? Ну что, соберем?
Да, из трупов кукол.
То есть глины там, да?
Да.
Там все девочки, да?
Ну, как правило.
Как тут квартира?
Вечерние съемки. Ноги. Да.
То есть в Крымском районе я лично наравнялся в 2008 году. Эксгумировал девушку, которая...
His parents, who lived in the same apartment, claimed they had no idea what he was doing, assuming his doll collection was simply an eccentric hobby. Even neighbors who noticed the foul odor emanating from his home dismissed it as plumbing issues. Each of Moskvin's dolls had names, birthdays, and detailed backstories he created. He celebrated their birthdays, played with them, and even spoke to them as if they were alive. Some bodies had personal belongings sewn inside them, including pieces of their gravestones and identification tags. Many of the dolls were dressed in clothes he had scavenged, but in some cases he kept them in the very garments they had been buried in.
After exhuming the corpses, Moskvin dried them using a combination of salt and baking soda, and then hid the bodies in secure dry places in and around cemeteries. Once the bodies dried, Moskvin carried them to his home, where he used various methods to make dolls in an attempt to give the children functional bodies, to be used when he eventually discovered a way to bring them back to life. Unable to prevent the bodies from withering and shrinking as they dried, he would wrap the limbs in strips of cloth and stuff the body cavity with rags and padding to provide fullness, sometimes adding wax masks decorated with nail polish over the faces before dressing them in brightly colored children's clothes and wigs.
When police confronted Anatoly Moskvin with the horrifying discovery inside his apartment, he showed no remorse. Instead of resisting, he calmly admitted to everything, detailing how he exhumed the bodies and preserved them. He insisted he had committed no crime, claiming he was merely helping the children by keeping them in his home, rather than allowing them to decay in the ground.
Moskvin was aware that he was committing a crime, but he felt the dead children were calling out to be rescued, and believed that rescuing the children was more important than obeying the law. He was also motivated by his own desire to have children, specifically a daughter. Anatoly often regretted that he never had children, and at one point attempted to adopt a young girl against the wishes of his parents, but his application was declined due to his low income. Moskvin denied any sexual attraction to the dolls and instead considered them to be his children. He spoke to and interacted with the corpses, sang songs to them, watched cartoons with them, and even held birthday parties and celebrated holidays for their benefit.
Despite his justifications, Moskvin's actions were undeniably disturbing. Authorities quickly determined that he was mentally unfit to stand trial. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and sentenced to indefinite psychiatric treatment instead of prison, initially confined to a high-security psychiatric facility. He was later considered for home treatment under supervision. In 2018, doctors proposed transferring him to outpatient care, but strong opposition from the victims' families prevented his release. Since his admission, Moskvin has remained under psychiatric confinement, with his mental condition being evaluated every 6 months to determine whether he is fit for release. However, despite multiple appeals, each assessment has led to an extension of his stay, as doctors continue to deem him a risk to society.
Grueling legal fights ended up earning him a second hearing, and as of September of 2018, he was offered the opportunity to continue his psychiatric treatment at home, and alongside this, the ability to essentially walk free. As you might expect, though, this decision has been met with pretty heavy controversy.
Moskvin's case remains one of the most disturbing in modern history. Whether he was truly insane or fully aware of his actions, the horror he inflicted on grieving families cannot be undone. His fate now lies in the hands of medical professionals, but for the families of his victims, justice will never be enough. Should Moskvin ever be released, or does he remain a danger to society? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this story intriguing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest true crime videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.